Hey there, I think we're just going to kick off. My name is Ben Sinhazen. I'm a senior software architect. Today I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Dorina Golden, who's the head of data science, and we are from Bayes Esports. Bayes is well known in the esports data industry for our data and odds distribution, as well as our partnerships on these endeavors with companies like Sportradar, Riot Games, ESL, DreamHack, Beyond the Summit, and many others. In addition to this, we also do a variety of consulting and white label solutions for companies. But for the context of this talk, we are mostly just big fans of esports, statistics, and tournament formats. So we're going to start talking out about the problems that tournament formats bring, and we'll do a review of some of the common tournament formats, and then we'll simulate and analyze these formats. To end off, we'll discuss some further extensions to this type of work or discussion. And hopefully, as we're trying to speed run this, there'll be some Q&A time at the end. So feel free to ask questions on Slido and we'll try and get to them. Okay, so posing the problem. So both traditional sports and esports have fundamentally very similar tenets which for the most part need to be constantly balanced out against each other. And this becomes very, very apparent when you start talking about tournament formats. So tournament organizers inherently want formats which bring them the most net value. And this comes in many formats like streaming metrics, both in terms of concurrent viewers, broadcast hours, ability to have sponsor logos and brand value embedded within the stream. The players, well, they want to maximize their potential and expected earnings, but they also want to maximize these earnings, not necessarily like in total, but also like on a per match and a per time basis. So there's a sort of sweet spot in terms of how frequently teams want to play, how many matches they want to play in that time. And in some esports, there's also the concept of pride, which motivates players in their organization. So in Dota 2, every Dota 2 player's got a dream of winning the international. The CSGO players want to win a major. All the LoL players want to win world. So there's some point at which money stops being important, and they just want to win at the top level. Most of these people, though, they don't have super strong opinions on formats when beyond what I've listed. Like they want a format which is obviously reasonable, but as long as it's not totally unfair. As in like a situation where it's predictable, it's predictably better for a team to like intentionally lose a game. They mostly don't care too much. There are overarching limitations in terms of how events can operate, such as like the total days that the event can run over in terms of the teams who are not willing to play longer than that. Stadium days or venue days that you're available to host an event in a large arena. And yeah, there's also certain regulations, especially now with COVID on, about how many hours you can play per day. Teams don't want to be playing for more than so many hours a day. Your production crew don't want to be. So there's kind of universal limits. From a fan or spectator perspective, though, they want formats which are relatively easy to follow and understand. And this also touches on a different but related topic of scheduling, because fans don't want to have to sit there and wait for 12 hours a day, for like an entire fortnight, watching their favorite teams play. So they care about mostly their favorite teams and more balanced matches. And very importantly, that like the top teams are not just eliminated too soon, whether that's because of the formats and the problems of variance within it. Okay, so next up. So yeah, we have made some comparisons with sports and esports, and what is kind of important and helpful within esports is that it's a bit more forgiving than traditional sports in many ways. So for example, teams can play multiple games in a day. They don't need to have like a 2-day break between games like in traditional sports like football or rugby. There's also much more limited chance of injury for players as a result of the actual matches, competitive matches. So team performance remains pretty stable for an extended period of time as a result of as a result of the lack of injuries. There are exceptions to this, but for the most part, this is the norm. And what's also very helpful is that qualifiers can be done online. So it saves you a huge amount of cost in terms of, you don't have to bring hundreds of teams together. You don't need like 10 or 20 football pitches so they can all play at the same time. So you can have these hugely parallelizable tournaments. And this is very helpful for when it comes to running a tournament. Next up to Arena, we'll just outline some of the different formats available, the pros and cons, and then jump into some simulations.
Thanks, Ben. So we're only going to talk here about the most common tournaments. And by this, I mean the single and double elimination, round robin, and CounterStrike style Swiss, which can then be combined into various multi-stage tournaments that we will also talk about. So the single elimination, you probably all have heard about it, you've seen it. Basically, you lose once and you're out, and if you win the round, you move on to the next and until you win the tournament. And the ups of this are quite clear. It's very, very simple. It's very fast. It's the least amounts of matches you need in order to have a clear winner in any tournament. And that's about it. So the downsides are, in my opinion, enormous. First of all, you need really good seedings. So for example, let's say you have two top teams playing and they meet in the first round. One of them is immediately eliminated. And you're left with just one top team in your whole bracket and they're just clearly going to win. It's not fun. And this leads also to increased chances of underdog victories, which I guess you might see also as a bonus. In the panel before, we heard of unknown teams in Dota just suddenly winning majors, which is kind of cool, I guess. But it's also a downside if you kind of want to plan your season. You're also always going to have a planned route, a perceived easier route to the finals, so people will just complain about it. And you need a power of two competitors, or you're going to have buys in the first round, which again is a question of is this fair or not. Also, you only get the first two places. If you want a third place, you need to play an extra match. And in my opinion, the largest drawback is that half of your competitors are going to go home after the first round, and then 25% more after the second round. It might not be such a problem in professional esports, which are played online mostly. But if, for example, I'm a competitor myself, I sometimes have to drive 3-4 hours to get to a competition. If I fight for 5 minutes and then go home, it's not fun. So to kind of deal with this, we have the double elimination, where you lose twice and then you're out. So you start in the winner's bracket, it's the same as a single elimination, but if you lose, you drop to the so-called loser's bracket and then get the second chance to fight back to the finals and meet the winner bracket in the winner in the final. And the drawback here is that you don't really know as an organizer how many final matches are you going to have, because if the losing bracket team wins in the final, then the team coming from the winner's bracket, they haven't lost yet. So if we actually gonna say you have to lose twice to lose, then they have to get a second final match. And now if you have Dota 2 and you have a best of 5, then this is hours and hours of play and you can't lose on the same day. So how are you gonna plan your live LAN final? And there are ways to deal with this, and usually it just doesn't happen. And then there's arguments to be made for why we can drop the double final match, but still this becomes a question of fairness. And of course, you have more matches due to this double bracket system. And it's also hard to understand as a competitor, if you're new to this, oh my God, where do I go? Where do I drop? Why do I play again here and not in this other place, and so on. And then the ups of this, of course, are that you get to play 2 matches instead of once. And also now you get automatically 3rd and 4th place with your finalists as well. And actually it's even more places than that. You have more leeway in seedings, because if we go back to our example before, the top team that lost in the first round, they can come back up from the losers bracket and still win the entire thing. And also there's more leeway for performance issues. So if you play badly once, you are sick or something like that, in the single elimination you're out, in the double elimination you can still come back and play well. Moving on, we have the round robin, which often is presented in this cross table that you see on the right. Here, everybody plays everybody, and you get points for winning. You can also get points for drawing. So this is the first format where you can actually have draws. This works for any even number of teams, not just 8, 16, and 32, and so on. And you can also repeat it multiple times in traditional sports. We see this very often with home away games being played. In League of Legends, we also have these double round robin prelims quite often. And the benefits are that it's really easy to understand, and you have a guaranteed number of games per participant, and it's now the same number for everybody. There is, of course, no easy path because you have to play everybody, and you can schedule this very far in advance. So at the start of the season, you already know who's going to play whom and on what day. The teams can plan, you can plan as an organizer. You also don't need seeding here, even more so. Actually, when you're done, you get a ranking, which you can then use for seeding later. On the downside, as we heard in the Valve panel, it can be quite boring because you have a lot of matches that are meaningless, or just when have top teams play low-ranked teams and it's just a roll. Nobody wants to see a roll. You also get a huge amount of matches in general. This is the largest amount of matches you can have. So you usually can't do this in one day. It's more of a league thing. You also can have a winner before the season is over, which is boring. You can also have a team eliminated before the season is over. And especially in amateur play, they might just not show up anymore because they're demotivated. And you need a way to handle tie breaks. This is hugely important. And Ben is also going to talk about this even more later. But just to give you a teaser, there are many ways to handle tie breaks, and we can simulate how likely a certain tie break format is going to lead you, the top team, to actually win the tournament. And here we have 4 different kinds. The coin flip, which is just random, head-to-head, which is how they played against each other, the tied teams, the win percentage overall in the tournament, and a decider match, which is when 2 teams play each other again. And you might be wondering why the decider is better than head-to-head. There are 2 reasons for this. First of all, just time-wise, let's say that tied teams played each other in the very first round, and then the round robin went on for a month. In this month, teams have improved differently. They maybe have traded players. So the decider is a more accurate depiction of how the 2 teams are performing now. Also, in the decider, if the stronger team lost maybe once in the head-to-head, it's less likely than they will lose twice in the head-to-head and then the decider. So it's like the chances of the top team actually prevailing are higher. And finally, it's just exciting. If this is there's a tie for the third place. For the fourth place, for the first place. Damn it! Then it's just exciting to watch this match because it actually means something. And you can also have some sport-specific tie breaks, like who scored the most points, or the shortest match time, which is common in my sport. And please don't use shortest match time in MOBAs. That's not a good idea. And please don't use most points in CounterStrike. That's also not a good idea. It's gonna explode this presentation if we talk about it now, but maybe someone will ask us as a question, and then we can talk about it after the presentation, why it's not a good idea. The last tournament we're going to talk about is Swiss, specifically Swiss Counter-Strike style, because there are many, many different kinds of Swiss tournaments. In Counter-Strike, we get 1 point per win and there are no draws. And so basically we start with this group of everybody and you just play a team. And then after this one match, you have some teams who have won one match, you have some teams who have lost one match, and then they play within their groups. So you end up with teams who have 2 wins, teams who have 2 losses, and then this middle group with 1 loss and 1 win, and so on, until we have a team that reaches the prescribed number of wins, which for 8 teams normally would be 3 points. So if you can win 3-0 or 3-1 or 3-2, and if it's 16 or more teams, then different rules apply, and there's not even a fixed number of rounds that you have to play for this. Only lower and upper limits, and get very complicated. Just look at chess. So let's not even talk about this. You can see it on the slides. And if you're confused, then I have proven the point I was trying to make. This is very hard to understand. It took me a while myself. What other downs are there? Yeah, well, you have to have seeding again. So if you don't have seeding, what might happen is that, again, your top teams are playing in the first round, and then one of them ends up in the top half and one ends up in the bottom half. And the team in the bottom half is going to have an easier way to get to the top again. This is actually a way that the system can also be gamed by participant on purpose by performing worse than they actually would have. It might also be that the winner is clear before the season ends, like in round robin. And the winner, once it's clear that they're going to win, they can, by playing in specific ways, decide to get second place, which is something we, of course, don't want. On the upside, we get fewer mismatched games in the round robin, and overall also fewer matches. But we get a guaranteed number of minimum number of games for each team, which is good. And we also give a semblance of ranking. So we might be fuzzy in the middle ranks, depending on how many rounds we play, but we definitely get our top teams and our low tier teams, so we have at least an idea of who's a good and who is a not so good performer in our bracket. Now the question we're actually here for, which one of these is the fairest? And how do we get there? Well, we just simulate all of them and we see how well they perform. We do this here in the presentation for 8 teams for each tournament. We have 2 skill tiers. So we have the skill called similar skill, where two teams see close to each other, are very close in skill, and the diverse skill, where they are a bit further apart. So in the diverse skill bracket, there's almost no chance of the top team losing to the bottom team, whereas in similar skill, the bottom team might still win a match. We also do everything by the book in terms of deciders and finals. So we just assume optimal conditions. And what we see is, first of all, if we have a higher win probability between teams, then this translates directly to our chance of winning the tournament. So on the right, we see how often does the top team actually come in first in different tournament formats. And we see that double round robin performs best of all of them, and single elimination performs worst. In the similar skill bracket, where the teams are quite close in skill, single elimination double round robin is 25% as likely to have the correct winner as the single elimination. And this is a lot. If you think that your winnings depend on this, your livelihood depends on this, then of course you want to play a double round robin and not a single elimination as the strongest team. And even in the diverse skill tier, we still have a 10% difference between these extremes. And this is all done with seedings. So let's see how this changes if seedings are omitted, if we just draw teams randomly. We see that except for round robins, which obviously don't care, throughout all the other tournament formats, there is a fall in accuracy. So seedings do matter a lot, and especially in single elimination. In diverse skill, the drop is quite significant. So not only this, but also we get more boring matches if we don't seed. And it just makes our strongest team less likely to win, and that's not fair. So let's please seed. And how can we seed? Well, if we don't know anything at all, we can always ask experts like Knoxville here, for example, for Dota. We can also use ELO or Glico ratings, which unfortunately in esports are not always available. Maybe we don't know everything. Maybe we have a world championship and the teams have never played each other before because they're from different continents. But historically, we might know that maybe Europe performs really well, maybe China performs really well. So we just see these top teams and then randomly spread the others through the brackets. This is also better than doing nothing. Or, which is really good, is just use these automatically seeding tournament forms like round robin and Swiss to seed the teams, to have preliminaries, and then from there have the playoffs. This is how it's usually done, actually. So this is an example from League of Legends. You will always have this group stage and then double single elimination finals. And this is also a hidden benefit to this, that you get to more teams get to play, but you still have exciting, narrowly matched finals in the playoffs. And this can get very complex, and esports have many particular tournament formats that they have developed, which is what Ben is going to talk about now a bit in detail.
Yeah, thanks, Dorina. Yeah, so quick talk on tiebreakers and beyond. Yeah, so Dorina showed how the different formats all do different jobs at determining a winner. And obviously the same approach can be applied to all of the outcomes. So by aggregating this, we can do this for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down based on the number of competitors. And we can come up with some sort of metrics for an overall error rate for an event's format. So the picture you can see here on the right is an example from the 2017-2018 Dota Pro Circuit. And this actually led to a situation where there was quite a healthy engagement on the topic, and tournament organizers were educated about how important formats are, which is actually surprising given that they're supposed to be experts in this field. But it also got a lot of them to ask questions about how they could improve their formats, what the issues were with their formats. And most of the reason behind this is because a single ranked list like this helps explain the points in a very simple way. And nobody wants to see their event have the worst format. No one wants to be in the bottom or near the bottom. They want to basically be in the middle or towards the top in terms of having a solid format. This approach can also be applied. This is an unweighted approach in this graphic, but it can also be applied to a weighted approach. So, for example, you can weight it by the prize money, or which is you can allocate out in this weighting, or you can weight it based on points if it goes on to like qualification to some other event. Like in Dota, there's the international. So if you had points that qualify you for the international, you can weight it by the points for each event. And this gives you a more accurate representation on how these points are allocated in terms of fairness. What is a nice side effect of these approaches is that they all allow you to easily test hypothetical situations. So, for example, in 2015, Valve changed their regional qualifiers for the international from the years before that, and they made two groups, and in each of the regions, and each group was a double round robin. But they changed it so that instead of just getting 1 point per win, they made it that if you split your 2-game series 1-1, you get 1 point. If you lose, you get 0 points. But if you win, you get 3 points. And this is just actually adding extra variance to the system. And a lot of people will be like, that's how they do it in football. But in this case, it actually doesn't make sense because it's not within a single game. It's over multiple games. And basically, you can model this within this type of system, and you can see the extra variance it adds and how it makes the best teams less likely to win and the worst teams more likely to win because it's increasing the value of a random upset. Related to this, and this is what Dorina was talking about, we can test which tiebreakers to use and which order to use them in. And this is optimal for a specific format. So if you're doing, for example, 8-team round robin, head-to-head is more value than if you're doing 40-team round robin because the value of an individual matchup is watered down by a bigger field. And that could be like an entire talk in itself. So I guess we'll probably be back at some points in the future to talk about that. But this is something which actually is very interesting because players might not care about the format as very much, but they really, really care when they get eliminated based on a tiebreaker which they think is bad. But the kind of final twist in this is that both tournament organizers and players are actually very bad at understanding which tiebreakers are statistically optimal. So this is always good to educate them on. Cool.
Okay, I'm going to skip the summary so we have actually typed for questions, which, you can also reach us on Twitter if you have any more questions, or me, you can better reach per email. And so the question I like a lot is, fighting games see the shortcoming of often hosting entirely open-ended tournaments. What's the best way to make people competing for fun and for money happy? So this is very interesting because I actually fight in a lot of things like this. They're not fighting games, actually fights. And if you want people to be happy who compete for fun, first of all, you have to have balanced matches because, again, nobody likes getting rolled. And you want to give people more than one match. So you want people to have 3-4 matches, also not too many because they're probably not used to playing a lot. And then ideally, you will want not to put the strongest competitors with the beginners. So you would want to spread that if you can, because if you are facing somebody who's a professional, it's just not fun. If you can't do that, and I have no idea how fighting games are organized at all. I apologize for that. If you can't have that, have something like preliminaries, which are group stage, and then a playoff as well. And then probably your professionals are going to go to the playoff, but the beginners, the fun hobbyists, will have maybe had a chance to play against their star, but also have had some fun matches where they actually could enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I would
When you get to
definitely
the
agree. I'm just going to add a little bit to your one before I pick one. But yeah, I
sure,
would
of
definitely
course.
say the bit depending on like the size of the field. So if it's like a huge open tournament, like 1,000 competitors or something, then you basically only have one or two options. Swiss makes the most sense in that you're able to do pairings, and this is something that like large Magic the Gathering or chess tournaments do, where people arrive on the day, they're able to play. If they pull out of the tournament because they feel sad after losing 2 games, it doesn't massively affect the entire tournament as much. Or you can do groups where the top two or one or two per group advance into like a knockout style tournament. Um, but yeah, definitely it depends on the size of the field. If it's just like 20 friends playing, then you can do something a little bit more extensive. But Swiss is nice. Most of your matchups become more interactive because they're closer in record and mostly closer in skill. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be sneaky. I'm gonna take Boston Major fan for you because I'm a big fan of the Boston Major. Um, not the winners, but everything else, second place teams. And yeah, in a season of say 8 major tournaments versus a season of 4 major tournaments, how important in each instance do you think it is to be fair? Um, yeah, I think it obviously depends on what's up for stakes. If there's huge money available for winning a series of them, or like a big ticket, like I think the reference here is Dota 2, where you have multiple majors where the winners or the teams in each earn points to qualify for something big tournament at the end, like the international, which was like $30 or $40 million in it. Then obviously you want to make each relatively fair, especially leading up to the event, because your last teams that are getting in over a tournament system that runs over like a year, you want the more recent results to mean more. So I would definitely say that the more fair tournaments in this context are needed right at the end of the season, and at the beginning you can have something that's a bit more open, a bit more experimental. But yeah, I'm always going to advocate for a tournament system that's more fair, but I agree that it can be more fair towards the end. Okay, Dorina, you take one.
I'll take the one from Kerry. Could there ever be a new tournament style invented as a sort of hybrid or a completely new format, or are the ones who suggested end be all? They're not the end be all at all. We just picked the 4 most common ones. So just to mention 2 more, you have Ladders, you have Global StarCraft League, which is common in esports. You also see, for example, in League of Legends, lots of different playoff variations. In Dota, I'm sure as well, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, there was one Red Bull Battlegrounds, which was like quite experimental, maybe a bit too experimental, but like the idea, the concept was really good. You had 3 lives and teams could challenge each other. There's certain like competitive principles which must like it makes sense to include at all times. Like it should never be a situation where it's optimal to lose, but provided you thought about your formats and it is coherent, then anything goes really.
Yeah, and don't forget, we also have things like races, which we can also have in esports. For example, in the battlegrounds kind of tournaments, where it just depends on which place you finished, and then that gets aggregated, which again lets you create new formats from that.
Yeah, that also incentivizes different play. So like in the battlegrounds format, there's like 2 major characteristics: how many people you kill and how long you survive. So if you increase one too much, then people start like hiding in sheds or swimming in the water where people can't kill them just because they want more points from that. And if you make the kills too much, then people just go Rambo and they just try kill lots of people. So that is an interesting question. Um, so a question from Anonymous. I like the name. Isn't seeding teams or players according to their skill in conflict with conditions from some of their publishers? Well, uh, I mean, I'm more familiar with Valve, there was a panel earlier. Is Valve too less? Yeah, Valve don't really care, I don't think. Um, and I can say this because, like, at some of the internationals in the past, they've literally asked my opinion on how I should see the teams. So that's just a good indication that they don't care about how accurate the seedings are. But in general, I think having formats which adapt better to bad seedings is generally better. But if you have to have some sort of seedings, then it makes sense to base it on skill. And if there are rules against that, then those companies, whether it's Blizzard Entertainment or wherever, are anti-competitive in that behavior. And they don't care about finding the best team. They care about arbitrary rules that they've written. So I'm not sure about the Blizzard example, but I don't see a good reason for it in general.
I'm laughing in the background because we keep getting told to wrap this up, so I'm just going to cut in here.
Oh, I can't hear cats on my side. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So we've been told repeatedly to please wrap it up. So thank you very much for the interesting questions and for hearing us speak. And feel free to reach out to us. If you're planning a tournament and you want to know, is it fair or not, we are happy to assess it for you.
Okay. Cheers, everyone.